What's up, you guys? Welcome to Whiteboard Wednesday. Today we're talking about MOA versus mil. So the place that this is relevant is you're getting a new hunting scope and you're gonna have to pick which system. Do you wanna go in the mil system or MOA? You can always see it right on the top of the turret. It's gonna say, we're gonna explain some of these other numbers in a minute, but that is a mil and that is an MOA system. Now, what this means is they're just using different units of measure in order to measure the angle that the scope is adjusting. When I click the top turret on a scope, it is moving that reticle, and the amount that it's moving, might be one tiny little millimeter here, but at 1,000 yards, it's changing that angle, right? And so it's moving a lot more than it is close. And so imagine that if I'm shooting a target, if I have a target at 100 yards, 500 yards. Wow, that was a crazy 5. Back to elementary. If I shoot this 100-yard target, I might get a nice little cluster like this. But all those bullets are a tiny bit apart, right? And so if we continue that trajectory and we extend that range and we shoot that same group out to 500 and 1,000, they're going to get a little bit further apart and a little bit further apart the further we get from your gun. Does that make sense? So when we're talking about an angular unit of measurement, that's what we're talking about. The scope is changing the angle that we're aiming at, and it will be different at every distance. So these two systems, neither is wrong. Both of them work fine. And I know fantastic shooters that use both systems. The only wrong answer here is to pick both and have some mil scopes and some MOA scopes. The best shooters aren't the best shooters because they picked one system or the other. They are because they know that system cold. And so pick a system and know it really well. There are pros and cons to each. We're going to get into them, and I'll explain a little bit more about why it ended up this way later. But most important thing is just pick a system and stick with it. Personally, I choose the mil system for some reasons we'll explain later, but neither is the wrong answer. All right. The first thing you're going to hear when you just talk to somebody is they're going to say, pick MOA if you're in the United States, because it's the same thing as 1 inch. False, 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 could not be more false. Now, the reason that this happens is if we shoot at 100 yards, 1 MOA tall is 1.047 inches. So they're roughly 1 MOA is close to an inch, but only at 100 yards, right? And so the reason that I say this is so false is not because it's like wrong, it's actually an angular unit of measurement. I'm not trying to use semantics on you. The reason is that it's just as easy in the mil system to approximate an inch, if that makes sense in your brain, as it is in the MOA system. So at 100 yards, if we are 1 inch high, if our group is 1 inch higher than our aim point, we need to adjust that turret, dial that turret down, right? Well, each click on an MOA scope is going to be 0.262 inches, roughly. So roughly 1/4 of an inch. In the mil system, it's really easy to figure out too. It's going to be 0.36, which equals 1/3. So if we're 1 inch high, if our group is 1 inch high at 100 yards, if you're on an MOA scope, it's 1/4 of an inch roughly. So you come down 4 clicks. In a mil scope, it's 1/3. So you come down 3 clicks. I just don't find that very difficult to figure out. And so when people say MOA is closer, I just disagree with that. It's just not that hard to work in 3 clicks for an inch. But you may also look at this and you'll see an advantage that we're going to talk about later of the MOA system. The MOA system, each click, and I should point out at this point, Almost all scopes for mil are 1/10 of a mil, and these are 1/4. We're going to assume that's just true here. You'll see this is a finer adjustment than that. And you say, well, I want to be a precision shooter. And so, well, yeah, I'm going to pick the MOA system. That could be an advantage, but let me show you what 0.098 looks like. I can't even dial it on these calipers. We're talking about that. See how far those two pieces of metal are? That's the difference in fidelity between an MOA click and a mil click. It's really, really tiny. And so we'll talk about the benefit and the drawback to that extra fidelity when we get more into the pros and cons. So let's take a real world example. This group that I shot yesterday with a Horizon rifle and 22 Creedmoor, that was my aiming point, but the group went up here at 100 yards. And so I need to make a scope adjustment in order to zero that. So I've measured from here to the group, and it's 2.8 inches, if that works easier in your brain. This, obviously Americans love inches, right? So if that's 2.8 inches, we say, well, how many clicks is that? Well, first let's do it in the mil system. It's 3 inches or 3 clicks per inch. So let's do the 2 inches first. So that's going to be 6. And then we have the 0.8 inches. And so that's going to be, roughly 2. To get up to that last little bit. So we're going to go up 8 clicks. Not very difficult to do. Now let's do it in the MOA system. Also pretty easy. We're 2.8 inches. The first inch is 4. The second inch is 4. So we're at 8 so far. And now we have to go up 0.8. Well, the closest rounding to there is going to be 0.75 or 3 clicks. And so we're going to go 4, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's going to be roughly 11 clicks to get down there. So either system is pretty easy to use as if you're wanting to think in inches at 100 yards. But quickly, we need to lose the whole inch thing entirely and just focus on the angles because we're going to be dealing with different distances. It's not all about 100 yards. So let's just get into it. Let's talk about some of these pros and cons. We've already talked about 2 of them, believe it or not. I don't know which color is more MOA, which is more MOA and which is more mil, Garrett?
Red's a little more mil to me.
Red that's a mil thing? All right. So the first advantage here in the pros section, the mil is a base 10 system. That to me is a really big advantage because let's say I'm shooting a target at 1,000 yards. Say it's a 3-foot target, which is 1 yard, right? It's a 1 yard tall. So at 1,000 yards, 1 of something tall is 1 mil because it's a base 10 system. Let's say it's now at 500 yards. We'll cut it in half. It's 0.5 mil. And so if you're wanting to make some of those quick adjustments, that trick just makes sense in my brain. It makes a lot of adjustments easier to do. It also works with anything, honestly. That was in yards. Let's say something is 1,000 meters away and the target is 1 meter tall. Well, that 1 meter translates to 1 mil of adjustment. 1 mil tall here. That's just a handy trick. Let's say we have 1,000 Jims lined up head to toe down there. Well, how tall is Jim? He's 1 mil tall. It's always going to be true. So the base 10 system is really nice for making adjustments like that. Now we'll go to the advantage of the MOA system, which is fidelity. It's a tiny, tiny, tiny bit more precise of an adjustment. At extended ranges, that actually can have an advantage. It's less than you might think when you do a little bit of the math though. All right, next advantage of the mil system is it is faster to express. This seems really, really petty, but when you are doing a lot of shooting, it kind of makes a big difference, in my mind at least. Let's say your spotter or whatever says to go up 5.9 mils. In the MOA system, it's a little bit longer. That would be 20.82 MOA. It's a little bit faster to express, and it just gets you right, just 5.9. And because it's 10 for every, we're moving in tenths of a click, the number is usually lower in addition to that. So not a huge thing, but it is something that is handy. MOA, I'm going to give an advantage personally. This is some personal preference stuff, but I would give an edge to reticle simplicity. What I mean by this is in the reticle, or the crosshairs of the scope, as you're looking into it, an MOA scope is almost always going to just mark 1 MOA, 2 MOA, 3 MOA, or something like that. It's usually not going to have the little, 1.25, 1.5, 1.75. It's just, that would be too tiny in there. And 1 MOA is just about the right amount of space in most scope magnifications to have not too busy of a reticle and just have each MOA shown. And so I actually really like an MOA scope personally, the reticles of them. But a lot of people also have a preference for what the reticles in a mill scope look like. Now, the part that I would knock the mill reticles just slightly, and again, it's something you get used to and it doesn't even matter, but as you're first reading them, what's become more common in the mill scopes is to show it in 0.25 mil increments in between, but you're on tenths of a click here. And so it gets to have the right number of little hash marks, the little subtensions in there to actually look good, and you get pretty quick at it. But it's something that just doesn't quite line up as well as the MOA reticles, in my personal opinion. Next, I'm going to give to the MOA, to the mill system, is travel per rev. So when you're shooting at extremely long distances, you only have a certain amount of adjustment you get to before you cross the 0. So this is where we are. We're going to cross the 0, and we're now on the second rev. So now this isn't 1, it's 11, because we've already gone around once, right? The advantage of that mill system is because, again, each click is now moving us very, very slight amounts further than on the MOA. And so you get more travel before you get to that second rev, which I really like because I hate going up into the second revolution, which is usually, past 1,000 yards with most cartridges, because the issue is it can be tough to remember, oh, I'm 1 rev up right now. And so I try at all costs to just never even go into the second revolution so I don't forget to dial back down to true 0. How many times are you going to hear somebody say, that's a 1 MOA group, that's a half MOA group? You're never going to hear somebody say, that's a 0.3 mil group right there. Like, it's just, for whatever reason, when we talk about group size, it is MOA. And that is just how it is. And so I don't know really that it's an advantage, because it's not as if you used a mill scope, you can't also say it's a half MOA group, but it is an advantage to just keep everything the same. There are lots of others. I've intentionally ignored a couple that we're going to kind of get to, but to me, these are the principal reasons to pick one or the other. However, if you shoot competition, I would almost for sure ignore MOA entirely. You'll want to go into the mill system. So if you're shooting PRS, even NRL Hunter a lot now, I mean, nearly all competitive shooters in those disciplines will pick the mill system. It's not that it necessarily is a superior system, it's just what has become popular there. And because of that, if you're the one guy with the MOA scope, somebody's going to say, I held a half mil a wind, and you're going to be like, oh, wait, how do I convert that? You can do it pretty easily, by the way. If you take mil multiplied by 3.5, you're roughly going to get your MOA. But if you ever think you could shoot a little local competition, maybe someday in the future could do that, I think you probably want to go with the mill system. MOA has the advantage of hunting shops. In the United States, at least, when you just go to hunting shops, you're going to see more MOA scopes. There's no reason, it's just that's what it's become in both of those spots. I hunt with a mill scope. Well, I know a ton of guys that do. There's not like an advantage somehow in an MOA works to being better for hunting, but for whatever reason, if you just talk to Bubba and you say, hey Bubba, what kind of scope you got on there? I'd say there's a maybe 60-40, slight improvement, slight chance he's on MOA instead of mill. Now, the reason you're going to want to know these systems so quickly is because, you know, if you got a deer at 500 yards, you're going to have to look at, then go to a dope chart or pull out your app and figure out your ballistics of like, okay, at 500 yards, this rifle needs to be dialed to whatever, 3.5 mils. And then you go and dial 3.5 mils. That system of range it, go to your dope, figure it out, and then dial it takes some time when animals can be walking away. So I do want to point you to one thing called turret tags. They're tiny little simple quick adjust yardage stickers with a really strong adhesive that you put on the turret of your scope based on the environmentals for where you're hunting that day. It's just a sticker sheet, and so if you're hunting at 10,000 feet for this hunt and then next month you have something different, you just put on different stickers for it. But it makes that system so much faster, so you don't have to go to your dope and then dial it. You just say, oh, it's 500 yards away, and you go to it real quickly. So you might check out turret tags for that new scope. All right, how did we get to this system? The mill system's coming from mortars. The system is basically taking arcs and radians if you go back to high school math. And so if we were to keep adjusting up our angle and keep going around in a complete circle, there'd be, I think, 6.28 radians going across, 6.28 arcs. And within each of those, then mil is a thousandth of each radian going up. And so that's where that system came from. The MOA system actually comes from the Babylonians. It's, 2000 BC kind of stuff. They loved, instead of base 10 systems like we're used to, the Babylonians loved a base 60 system because it was divisible by 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so as they were doing astronomy and different things, they wanted something that was highly divisible. They created the MOA system saying 360 degrees goes in a circle, and then within each degree, you have minutes, right? Minutes of angle. There are 60 of those. And so that's kind of how we got to the MOA system. That's why we have two of them. One was developed a lot later to be a more simple base 10 system, but the MOA system has been around for thousands of years. So which is it, mill or MOA? Again, neither answer is wrong. For me, I've chosen the mill system. Pick one, stick with it, and know it cold.